All right, so today we're going to be talking about really staying on top of the ball with your irons. Not maybe not as important with the driver because you're already behind it when you're set up, but really staying on top of it in backswing and transition, not leaning in front or getting too far behind the ball. And so when I look at this, you have to have a good camera angle. This camera angle is a little bit offset they're using, but it's Davis Love. But if you look as he takes the club back and goes into his backswing, if the camera doesn't shift, which it doesn't, good. It really didn't move. There's some neck rotation here, obviously thoracic mobility, which is right in the middle of the spine that we talk about. But a lot of times when you see players like this, when they rotate off or move or rotate, great players will stay right on top of, especially the modern swing, which is, it's getting pretty good out there. Obviously, if you watch week in week out on the tour, both of them. But doing this, the reason why I say it gets awkward for most amateurs is when they turn, you can call it physical imitation, you can call it whatever you want. You can call it just because that's the way they move, or see it, or feel it, or just do it. But they usually either move off this line, so that, like, I draw it usually right on the ear, and you have to have a stable camera, and they move off of this line, which what happens when you do that, that's going to load up your right leg. We call it rooted. You'll be rooted and heavy in your right leg, even though it's kind of wobbly. It's still got more like pressure down. And then they won't have any on the left side, so you're not able to use both feet, both sides of the body, like bilaterally, because you're losing one of those roots. Then you fall into you get heavier on one, then you go back to the other, and then you have to start going back and forth laterally. And then you'll see players that turn and kind of like stack and tilt, which they actually teach it, which is crazy. But like they'll move their, if you just look at the line here, they'll back bend through this to the spine here, and their ear would be over here on the front side of the ball. Then they kind of go back a little bit off of that, kind of backwards through impact, and they counter some of that stuff. But again, you kind of load the left leg, the right leg's not rooted, and stack and tilt. Really, the best way to rotate is to rotate over a true center. Get centered up over the ball, get addressed correctly. Don't get tilted to the right too much. A lot of people talk about K'ing up, tilting your body to the right and set up. You don't want to do that. You want to try to get as square as you can to the ball, all your body parts, and then when you turn, you want to make sure when you're turning, which is another thing that I see from here, is amateurs when they do turn, then they start losing this again. They start losing their positioning to strike from, their centerness. So what we want them to be able to rotate their whole right side and then maintain that stability in being centered. So over both feet, so you can use that action. If you just stay centered and don't turn on the backswing, so if you don't turn your right side, it's going to be an all arm swing. Then you have to find it really late in the downswing and kind of reconnect and get torque through there, and you can do it. There's some players that do that, but you just can't. I really can't count on that. Usually, amateurs aren't going to recover out of that. So, and if you do, then keep doing it. It's more of a style thing. It's not a style if you just go arms up, arms down, though. That's not a style. That's called bad golf. So I like to get my players to get their right side, their entire right side, if you're right-handed, to move, to turn correctly, and then keep their center that they started with, especially over irons. You're already behind it with a driver, so it's a little bit misleading. It's not always the same. You're just a shape on it because of ball position. So it looks like it's a little more behind, but really it's the same type of move. You're not really moving off of it more with the driver. But I will say this is great iron players, they really don't move off to the right and then back to the left. There was a few that did it back in the day when they were taught that, which was like, I think it was Hal Sutton and Curtis Strange and I believe one of their coaches. That was just one of the things they would like to move off the ball and back into it. And if you get it down pat and it works for you, go at it. Have fun with it. But I just don't see it working much as a whole. I see really great iron players staying on top of it, rotating their right side, and then the last thing I would say is stability and transition. So there's not a lot of we don't want a lot of down cocking here. We call vertical wrist cock. Vertical wrist cocking it could be, especially for amateurs, is not going to recover out of that in the downswing, whereas pros could. Not getting collapsing in this area. You want stability. Now it doesn't mean that it could have a long swing, but it doesn't. What we don't want is flimsiness back and forth, or the arms to collapse back into the body, like get real narrow in this area, because that's going to what that'll do is that'll take the energy in the shaft to make it run up and down. It'll be going from your hands to the head and then back to the head to the hands, and you're not creating any stability in where I talk about that middle lead side of the shaft. You won't have the pressure that you need in that area. And so I would highly doubt that you would recover and find that. But if you do, hey, and you can find it down. There might be, this player sure didn't do that, but you might have a player on tour that gets it in narrow and collapse a little bit, and they've got it not in the right spots, even coming down, and they start turning that back down and timing it up later in here and connecting with what I'm saying anyway. They get that stability really late, but that club's flying through this area. And again, it's more, if you've already got it, would it be, I would probably ease some of the stuff that we do into that. If you already had it, I wouldn't just be full blown with it, though. I wouldn't make it radical. But getting pressure earlier, no doubt, can make your life a lot easier. So, all right. So we'll look at that again. Pretty simple today, really. When you look at these players that turn, Davis Love's got a great one. If you look, you can see a big right side turn. He's got a lot of width, talking about, not superficial, width. He stays on top where he started from. And so he's got full right side, so he's very torqued. He's got the center where he needs to be for both feet are rooted here, so he can unwind, so that'll allow for better circling. It'll allow for better circling here, not spinning, but circling slowly. It'll allow for better that because he's got connection through both feet here. He's got both roots. It really, even if you took pressure, there would be one a little bit more than the other, whatever. But both of them have a lot of pressure in the ground there. It's when you don't have one, or the other one's really heavy and the other one's got nothing, no pressure. So, when you have only one root in transition, you better be able to dance, because you're going to have to get back to that ball and hit it solid and all that. You better have phenomenal hand-eye coordination, and most people don't. So this is what allows you, if you're having problems getting what you would say the old classic line, getting through the ball, most of that is because you might be centered here. Your center line might be good, but you don't have the rotation. So then when you get the rotation, you lose your center line, and that's where video would come in. You have to study yourself to see where you're at, and you want to make sure that when you're doing this, that it's a straight. When you video yourself, this one's a little offset that they used, but you'd want to get it square to your setup, and you'd want it right on your midline, right on your belt buckle, and about belt buckle height is optimal. And then just study it. Look where you're at. Look if you're turning. Are you turning your right side? Do you have good stability? And the last thing today would be, do you have stability at the top of transition? Is that club really down cocking really hard? Is it kicking back out the other way, being like casting too early and the handle stopping like we talked about? Or is it like when you see it, it's very stable in this area, whether it's long or short? And is it coming out of there and keeping its stability? Is it staying stable? And you can see here he's keeping a lot of range and width, which is awesome. And it's just so stable in this area. It's not a lot of vibration and kicking and bouncing. And you'll see players that have some of that, but they make up for it a little later in the swing. You'll see some tour players, couple of tour players that do it, but really the really elite ball strikers, they keep that club stable. They keep their body, they turn the right side really well. You have to do it at some point in transition. It might be the stage 3. It might be when you come into it, you torque your body. It might be you're torquing the entire time, which is really kind of what we want. We want that right side moving the entire time. But you don't have to. You might not move in this area, or you might not move in this area much, and then all of a sudden you get it late. Or you might be like Kenny Perry. It starts happening, right in here, and you start seeing them torque up, or Fred Couples kind of lazy, and then all of a sudden turns really late. But you have to get that torque into that, into those obliques. And in the foot, the feet are just telling. A lot of times people are trying to pressure the feet because they hear this about pressurizing the feet, and it's all in ground and ground reaction forces and all those things. I can tell you all that's wonderful. That's just measured. If your body alignments are off upstairs, so if your head is one way or the other, like I was saying, just the basic simple stuff. If you side bended, back bended, or whatever, moved off of it, whatever you've done, it is changing the pressure in your feet. So your upper body absolutely changes the pressure in your feet and the location where they are in the feet even, and gets more into the pelvis with that, in that area. But still, that's what ground reaction forces are. It's a cute fancy word that technical people use, and I use it too. It is ground reaction force. Good word. It's cute, but it doesn't mean anything. Like like Davis Love would have never even heard that in his entire life. Ground. And they might have heard use the ground, but you use the ground by using your body. Your body transfers that weight. So learning how to use your right side, learning how to sink properly and slow down, like the slow down effect we talk about. Learn how to get your body to stay on top as you rotate completely. That's creating torque into that right side, and that's creating torque down straight into the ground and pressurizing. So everything we do is teaching how to get that pressure, but you don't want to try to fake pressure into the ground. I see a lot of people try to just dig themselves into the ground, straight down and not turn the right side, or they're trying to load up their right side too much and then they lose their left side root. So it's just, you have to understand what you're trying to do. You're trying to stay centered over that as you're making a big right side turn. And like I said, if you do some of the things we talk about in other lessons, which is how to sink and not squat. Squatting kills the energy. You don't want to just squat. That's not what you want to do. Sinking, if you listen to the lingo when I say that, there's a reason why I say sinking versus squatting in transition. Sinking is gradual. It's going through a motion. It's very slow. It's not one frame, like one shot. But if you just squat, that's when guys get really in trouble, girls, whatever. But they get really in trouble because it stops the energy. It kills the flow. It'd be like, consider not the same as Charles Barkley, but it has some of that to it. It just gets stabby. It doesn't have that silkiness to it. Like sinking is more tied into silkiness. Squatting is more, in my opinion, kind of those sharp, real sharp, jerky patterns, almost similar to the yips. It's just real kind of ugly looking. Doesn't have that freedom and that flow to it. So when you watch somebody that sinks, like a Davis Love and about everybody on the tour, they time it up the way they need it, and they do it in different areas. Some of them do it. Ben Hogan did it really early in his swing. Some will do it like Byron Nelson did it extremely late. I work with a player on the tour. It's one on both the PGA and the Champions that does it really late. It's a neat way to do it, and it's a little later than I like, but it's really, really, really efficient way. So you just kind of look and see. You got to find your style too, as well as a player, and a lot of that comes through lots of rounds of golf as well. And some people do, like even today. I just saying I don't like it when peak players move off. I'm not saying you can't play. There's very few things I'll really say where you can't do that, you can't do this, because there's recovery. You have to realize the downswing. The reason why I made the video on my downswing guys, because I can take about any backswing you give me and take them out of position, in position, whatever you want, body or club, and just teach them how to recover. If I'm hands-on, it's really not complicated. Trying to do it over the internet or over the web, you're crazy. You'll have to find a lot of that on your own, but through a lot of rounds and studying yourself and finding out where your strengths and your weaknesses are. But because there is style into it. But if you just by bring any position in, I've seen the wrist conditions, positions at the top and then transition, body positions way out of whack. But if you teach them how to recover back to right where the delivery is actually going to happen from, you see some crazy magic. But I haven't really figured out a way to do that by just talking to somebody, because it really does need to be field-based, hands-on. Or you could do it on Skype, something like that. You can definitely do that. Right now we've got, the technology is amazing. You got FaceTime, or you got Google Hangout. You can just go live. And you get an earpiece in, you get a Bluetooth for your phone, and you take a lesson. It's just like being at the driving range. You don't get hands, but we can see it, and players can communicate. We see it all the time. They can change just like in a real lesson by verbal communication when they're actually with a club in hand. So going back and forth with demonstration. So, those are just a few principles today that I wanted to cover, because they are huge, really, in our program and what we want with our players and the style that we teach. I don't remember anywhere in my career where I've taught anybody to move off a golf ball, or K up really, or get tilted to the right, because you get unbalanced and your spine's in a horrible position. You're basically playing uphill. So you want to get some of these basics in, and it'll help really anybody. If you just get, if somebody said on stability, how is one way you can get stability of the club? I think the other stuff was somewhat self-explanatory about turning your right side and staying, on top of it, not moving left or right. But getting here, gets trickier, because you do, You're dealing with some physical limitations as well. Tension can be in there. How it should be firm up in this area, but it shouldn't be like tight, but it should be firm enough. And then when you get to transition, don't try to rip out of it. Try to get the club and the body to stop and collect. You know, if you think of Matsuyama, does a great job of that. Everybody needs to feel like that. That's an amateur or in our program, especially the first month. They need to feel like that, what that looks like, and just take forever up there. Stay up here forever. You're not hitting anything back here. You just want stability and torque in both the body and the club. And so you get stability in the torque, then you can come through and your body and club will work more in unison. I see it all the time. And it's not every player in the world really does it like that, but there's definitely a correlation of having that slowdown effect in the golf swing with really every player. And that slowdown effect is in transition. So with that being said, I will open it up for questions and then we'll wrap it up. Doesn't look like there's going to be any questions. So I think it's pretty simple what we're trying to do today. Usually should be, but these are key components. I don't talk about them probably enough. Eventually we're going to put out a new series of videos that it should be, I think for the ones that follow the program, I think that you will be extremely excited when you see them because a little bit more covering the basics like we did today. I mean, my stuff's out there. If you want to know what I teach, you don't have to go very far. I mean, I had a player that sent in from Florida. There was a doctor that sent in this two or three emails about how he got in the online program, I think a couple years ago, and he didn't understand what I was talking about with that back wrist. I mean, he understood it, but he didn't realize how. I told him like how important that back wrist was every single time we talked, and I explained it over and over and over. Dude, you get the back wrist right, your life is going to be much better, and if you get the back forearm right, your life's even going to be better than that. But I just talked about wrists, and I think he was, because he had too much technical jargon. I think he'd been around all over the internet like most players have that come to us. A lot of them stay with us long term, but he was one of them that got out. He tried it a couple months. He had some really good rounds. He had some really bad rounds, and he wouldn't buy into even in his email. He said that the 5 and 10 yard scale. You know, he goes, now I look back. You know, he sent all this now because he's striping the ball. He's hitting it phenomenal. And he said, yeah, that back wrist is the secret. And how much it changed his ball striking and his golfing journey. And it went on. I mean, I wouldn't go into all the details, but basically the 5 yard scale, I told him, if you can't do a 5 yard and 10 yard scale and you don't get the back wrist right, you're not going to succeed in our program. You're not going to succeed in anybody's program. It won't matter. You're not going to either one of them. It's not going to matter. And he finally figured it out, and now it's changed it. So sometimes it takes a little longer. Sometimes it takes longer to register. My videos on YouTube are out there, and I'll put them up, not quality wise, but content wise, I'll put them up against anybody out there right now. I don't even think it's close. So as far as real content, really what's going on, and true legit biomechanics, and what you're supposed to do to build you to be a ball striker. There's nothing that we're hiding. So if you study those and you learn the language, just that alone will get you better. And if you keep watching players on the tour, on both tours, and you'll start seeing all these things that we do, what I'm talking about. Because even when I talk about the right wrist or the back wrist has to do what we want it to do at some point in the golf swing. It doesn't have to do it when we say it, when we want it to happen, but it has to be done at some point in the golf swing. And if you understand that back wrist, you understand lag, you understand it. We don't even teach lag. You don't have to. The club's only doing what you do. Your wrist and arms control everything that club's going through. So the body is doing something that's different. I'm not going to get into that, but your arms and your wrist, man, you're talking about that is what you're striking with. Without them, you're not playing. So you better master those. And I've spent a lot of years learning how to do that, and I found it. And I found it as a player and as a teacher, and it doesn't fail. You put somebody on our driving range, they do not fail. I can't remember the last time I saw somebody struggle on our hands-on, that trains with us. It's just because we know exactly what we're doing with that. Now, even if you're not doing it exactly right with that, you're going to get better just doing a little bit. You get it exactly right, where we're talking now that the wrist should have been right on that same axis as the arm goes back. If you get that right, and you get your right side turned correctly, and you did the fundamentals of staying on top of it, that right there alone, you're going to be playing, especially if you're an 80 shooter, shoot 75. 75 and above is going to play much, much, much better. And however good you get at it, it's probably however good your ball striking gets. And then it's really after that, if you mastered that, with your arms and wrists, if you truly mastered it, and it's really just about your talent at that point. It's really just about how good really are you, if you've got that down. Because now you're dealing with like people's mobility, their strength levels relative to golf, their talent, their field sense and awareness. You're dealing with time. Everybody's dealing with timing, but you're dealing with silkiness of the body. You're dealing with some other things that are a little bit more or it's always body and club, but a little bit more body based, in my opinion, that you have to go after. Because if you get the arms and the wrist right, and the right side's moving right, and you're on top of it, you're probably going to be a good player. The odds are you have to really make some silly mistakes on the downswing, and you could. It's a game where the downswing if you can do anything on the downswing, you can go. I mean, you might have the best backswing in the world, and all of a sudden the downswing you look like Charles Barkley, or you might look like Charles Barkley going back and then have this phenomenal downswing. The downswing, at the end of the day, what you're doing there is got all the golf balls really going to know is when that club starts back in your body to go through the ball, hit the ball and go through. So. But anyway, I hope everybody will probably be talking more about the back wrist. We'll eventually talk about the lead arm and the lead wrist. We don't really ever do that. We keep that because there's really a couple styles, but there's more than a couple, but there's really just one or two. We believe the back wrist is definitely the way to attack and get it mastered. But there's also a couple other things you can do that are tricks we'll probably go into as we get in more to like the winter and stuff, because it kind of suits certain styles. I'll save that for then. But anyway, I hope everybody has a great week and weekend, and hope everybody's family that's in either Texas or Florida, everybody's safe. I'll talk to you later.